days ago, and I'm not sure if you heard this, but the founder of CNN, Ted Turner, passed away, and he was 87. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating about this man's life is this idea of persistence, of mental resilience. He started CNN in 1980 at a time when everybody said that a 24-hour news network was never going to succeed, that it was going to fail. People laughed at him, people ridiculed him, and it took 11 years until 1991 to when the Gulf War happened, to when his bet finally paid off. And one of the things I think is really interesting is that most people would not have the stamina to keep going for 11 years. 11 years of being laughed at, 11 years of being told you're going to fail. Most people would give up. I mean, I know for me, I would probably give up after the first 6 months. Where does that come from? That ability to say, you know what, I don't care what people think. I am completely immune to external validation. And I have a very, very high tolerance and high ability or high capacity for risk. That is one of the most overlooked ingredients, I think, in terms of achieving your goals, this idea of really not caring what people think. Take it away, Dr. Swart.
Wow, there's a lot there. That's a very impressive story. And for people who have experienced that loss, that's exactly actually what my book, The Signs, is about. It is about receiving signs from beyond or the universe. But to answer your question, there's quite a few things here. So there's a sort of a scale of motivation, and motivation is one of our 6 ways of thinking. So there's logical thinking, emotional thinking, physicality, so messages from your body, creative thinking, intuitive thinking, and motivation. So knowing what really makes you get up in the morning and want to do the things that people are laughing at you for or saying that you shouldn't do or that you're going to fail on, that building up that pathway to be really strong is very important. And it often comes from childhood. So interestingly, a small amount of stress or trauma in childhood can actually make us more resilient, whereas obviously too much can make people very stressed and anxious. So maybe channeling something that you've experienced and, you know, giving yourself that data that it's made you more resilient. I also talk about the difference between resilience and mental toughness. So resilience I define as the ability to bounce back from something bad happening or, you know, bad news or bad narrative from people. And mental toughness is never allowing yourself to go like beyond that ability to cope with things. And like with anything, neuroplasticity, which says that our brains can grow and change throughout life, at any stage, any age, any mindset, means that you can train yourself to become better at those things.
Dr. Swart, it's great to have you on the program. I know that you train top executives and business leaders on how to achieve peak brain performance. If you were to talk to our audience about some lessons they can take away from that as well, because the question of nature versus nurture inevitably comes up, can peak brain performance be taught?
Absolutely. And it really starts, with some very basic things like sleep, diet, hydration, exercise, and how you manage your stress. So a lot of people will look at things like, should I take supplements or should I do fasting? But I always say, if you don't have those basics right, there's not really much point doing anything else. So it's, you know, getting 8 hours of good quality sleep a night, eating a balanced, varied diet, drinking enough water, that affects your memory and your concentration, making sure that you're breathing normally and deeply, because stress makes us breathe in a shallow way or hold our breath. So looking at all of those things. And then stress management is really the most important one, because it's the stress that will kill you in the end. Stress kills off neurons in the brain. So learning ways to manage that, whether it's through breath work, meditation, time in nature, time with the people that you love, though it's really important to focus on those things.
I loved what you said earlier about the fact that having a difficult childhood in some ways can be quite useful. And I say that very delicately because obviously, as you point out, it is this very, very fine line. You know, you want to have a childhood that does help you with generating emotional resilience. But obviously, if you have too much of a difficult childhood, of course, it can be too much to overcome. One of the things that I think is also interesting, going back to the founder of CNN, Ted Turner, is that he did also have a very difficult childhood. He had a father that was, he talked about being very volatile. He also lost his father to suicide, I believe, in his early 20s. He also lost his sister. There was a lot of childhood trauma. And what childhood trauma, again, if it's not too much, can do, it can allow you to withstand emotional pain. And so this idea of being able to pursue your goals without caring what anybody thinks, which again, I think is so crucial to it, because a lot of people talk about success in relationship to hard work and in relationship to persistence. And there's various sort of threads that go into what makes a person successful. But this idea of having a high tolerance for embarrassment, for social disapproval, and you see that with so many visionary founders, is something that I don't think is talked about enough. So this idea that you can develop that trait, I mean, again, it's quite difficult to achieve extraordinary success if you care too much about what people think of you, because you're not going to be willing to take the necessary risks. So in terms of this particular trait, how do you start from the ground up to develop it within yourself if you are someone who cares a lot about what people think of you?
These are such brilliant questions. I'm really enjoying this. So a few things have come to my mind. When I was working with these leaders, I would show them a table, because Freudian psychology said that whatever age you have a disruption at during your childhood, this is what's going to be wrong with you for the rest of your life. Whereas his student, Erickson, and you can Google this, the psychosocial stages of childhood development, said that wherever there was a disruption, there was a potential vice, but there was also a virtue. So for a lot of these industry leaders, the stress or trauma was usually around the ages of 5 to 7. And the vice and the virtue for that age group is inferiority versus industry. And industry by meaning working hard. So often these people have a very strong work ethic, and like you said, a high risk appetite as well. So for people to try to bring this into their own life, it's really about connection. So that's connection to yourself. So having a regulated nervous system, having, a sense of the connection between your mind and your body, and not feeling so cut off from your body, and not listening to signals that your body gives you, and kind of, embracing all of your senses to experience the world. And then it's about connection to others, because our sense of belonging and the community of people that we have around us have a really big impact on us through something called social contagion. So, you're likely to be as hardworking or as successful as the people that you spend the most time with. Not always, but it's an influence. And then what's really interesting from neuroscience and the connection between science and spirituality is a connection to something greater, or having a purpose that transcends yourself. So I wish if we could ask Ted that there was something that he believed, something that he thought was so important that it was worth going through that 11 years of struggle. I wish we knew. Maybe Zain.
I wish I could have spent time with him. I sadly wasn't able to, but he's somebody that really has inspired so many of us. And
it's quintessential American maverick. That was his story.
There's so many lessons to take away from his life, beyond just the fact that he founded CNN. Just that particular mindset, that emotional resilience, that ability to withstand pain, that ability to withstand ridicule for 11 years is something that I think all of us can learn from. Dr.